So, friends, we are back to Hopkins. We were in the middle of discussing Hopkins' prosody, and now I think the content part of it, the meaning, the message that he has to convey, and in fact, the message also lies in conveying, so that the prosody can't be separated from the content. So, from that angle, Professor Payal Nagpal will give comments about one or two important poetic expressions by Hopkins, and we'll then correlate the two parts to make it a kind of comprehensive understanding. So over to Professor Payal Nagpal again.
Thank you, Professor Prakash. So, like we discussed, that prosody is important here, and we were looking at the use of sprung rhythm in the Windohover. I caught this morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dapple dawn drawn, falcon in his riding. Now, it refers to the kestrel, the bird that is a predatory bird, and that's where the challenge comes in. So there is the Windohover is it's a simple idea. It's about a bird that swoops towards its prey, and at the end of it, the Cillian, or the land between the furrows, is shown to be gleaming. There is the Christian idea of glory in suffering and in the giving up of life. There is, it's the embracing the one who suffers. The poor and the meek will get heaven. So that idea is there. But the fact that this is a predatory bird throws up a lot of questions and a lot of challenges here. If you look at the very simple association here of morning's minion, how the speaker here has seen the morning's minion, which is the bird, and the bird is referred to, the darling of the morning is referred to as the kingdom of daylight's dauphin. So this bird is like the prince of daylight, and the color here is dapple dawn drawn and falcon. Again, the use of the word falcon here indicates a kind of predatoriness to the whole idea. In his riding, or of the rolling level underneath him steady air and striding, high there, how he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing. Again, this throws a challenge, this throws a question. High there refers to the wind. As we can see that the bird is called a windhover because it hovers in the sky before it swoops down. So it remains stationary at one point in the sky and keeps flapping its wings and then swoops down after identifying its target. So high there refers to that bird at that moment, how he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing. Now, the question that has baffled critics is, whose wing is the wimpling wing? Because this bird is a predatory bird. So can this bird refer to its own wing as the wimpling wing because it's going to swoop down? Or a more recent work has referred to this as the wimpling wing of the bird that is going to be kind of attacked by, it refers to the prey in a sense of the predatory bird. As a skate's heel sweeps smooth, please look at the alliteration here, sweeps smooth, and prior to this morning minion, or daylight dauphin, dapple dawn drawn. So there is this kind of movement that we can see. So as a skate's heel sweeps smooth on a bow bend, so the hurl and gliding rebuff the big wind. So the heel sweeps smoothly, the movement of the windhover, the movement of this bird is smooth, and there is a hurl, it glides and it rebuffs the big wind, which means that this small bird, because the kestrel is not a very big bird, it's also running counter to the existing current of the wind, because when it kind of hovers and it turns around, it goes against the current of the wind. My heart in hiding. So here we come back to the speaker who sees this sight of this predatory bird and of its majesty. In fact, in a lot of poems by Hopkins, the idea of the master, the mastery, something that we see in the wreck of the Deutschland also is present. So here, this kind of a magnificent sight leads the speaker to say that my heart in hiding stirred for a bird. So one wonders, is it the speaker whose heart stirred for a bird, or is it the predatory bird whose heart stirs for a bird? The achieve of the mastery of the thing. So the mastery refers at one level to the mastery of this bird, the Windohover, who's mastered the current of the wind, even though it's going against the currents, and at the same time this predatory bird has, it's going to swoop down now to get its prey, and this part is referred to as brute beauty and valor. An act, O air, pride, plume here. So, this beauty, this majesty that the speaker sees in the Windohover is brute because, as mentioned, the relationship between this bird and its prey is going to be predatory in nature. And yet, because it goes against the current of the wind, there is great valor. Another line that throws a huge challenge to critics from all ages, ever since I think the Windohover caught the attention pretty much in the 1920s. Buckle and the fire that breaks from thee then a billion times told lovelier, more dangerous, O my chevalier. So, buckle. Now, buckle has two very different meanings. One is you buckle up, you gear up for something, and one is you buckle your knees, in a sense, you kind of collapse. So, this idea of buckling here again throws a challenge as to what really speaking is this poem all about, one that is dedicated to Christ. So, we know that ultimately this is in some sense connected to the Christian idea of suffering and of glory through suffering. So, buckle and the fire that breaks from thee then a billion times told lovelier, more dangerous, O my chevalier. So, chevalier is clearly indicative of the soldier, and the idea that this is the fire that is there is dangerous. It's lovelier, but it is also very dangerous. It ties up with the idea of brute beauty and valor. So here again, I would request Professor Prakash as to how he would, interpret Hopkins' challenge, I think, that he throws in this particular poem, because with the last couple of lines, the entire thing is again going to turn around.
No, with your help now I can explain it to myself that there are certain forces that work in human life, and at the level of imagination, and this is a kind of vision that I can see depicted in the lines, that there is a bird which is innocent, which is running against the current, and there is another bird which is a predatory bird, as you say, the violent, the destructive bird, and that is going to exercise control over the smaller bird, and that there is an observer called the poet, and he can see this crisscross between a power on one side and humility on the other, and that philosophically speaking, it's a very rich kind of pattern that he is able to build.
Yes.
And that way I think it's poetry of a different kind. And who knows, finally the ordinary people whose language stirs the imagination of the poet, those people finally, even though they work under a discipline, finally they'll find their savior, and that savior is going to control the whole thing from the point of view of the people. So that's the Catholicism that I can notice in this, that individuals themselves will not be able to find answer. The answer will come from somewhere else. And Catholicism means that there has to be a convention which we have to follow. So the whole thing falls into a pattern, I say exactly, under your help.
So I agree that yes, there is this idea of the bird as displaying beauty and valor, but the nature of this beauty and valor is brute. So the poem throws a challenge because the predatory bird, to connect that with the Christian idea becomes very, very problematic.
Well,
And
problematic as well as I think that this is a realistic idea in the sense, that
yes,
Yeats pointed this out in Second Coming also. The Second Coming was of the predatory bird or the predatory animal who's with slow thighs, moving towards Bethlehem to be born again.
yes.
So the second coming of Christ, which is also captured by, and they are contemporary to each other, the second coming is going to be violent. It would not be as peaceful as Christ's appearance as a kind soul. Next time he is going to be very strict disciplinarian. Maybe that's the
So
idea.
maybe that is the idea. Because if we look at the last couple of lines, where the second part, the second tercet in a sense, no wonder of it, sheer plod makes plough down Cillian. Shine and blue beak embers, ah my dear, fall, call themselves, and gash gold vermilion. So we have now moved from the sky to the earth. And what is being praised here is sheer plod. Sheer plod of turning the earth over makes plough down Cillian. So Cillian is the space that is there between the earth, that is there between two furrows. So there are furrows and there is space between the two furrows, which is referred to as Cillian. And the poet says, sheer plod makes plough down Cillian shine. So it's not simply showing the turning of the earth over through the plough, but of the shine of the Cillian. Because once again, we have color here and blue bleak embers. So there are embers, which means that there is a kind of fire, there is a kind of energy that is there, but this is blue bleak. Fall gall themselves, and finally what we are left with is gash gold vermilion. Again, color, the use of gold here tells us that this is what one probably aspires for in the whole Christian idea. Fall, gall themselves, gash gold vermilion. So with this, now that this is the entire sonnet that we have in front of us, the kestrel being a small hawk, and the idea that it remains suspended in midair and it scans the ground for prey, but it does not buckle down. It in fact probably buckles up to swoop and to move down in terms of a flash, a descent. But at the same time, it throws up the challenge of the last three lines that turn the whole thing around, where there is great mastery, great majesty in the predatory nature of the bird, but the gold vermilion lies in the soil being turned over, probably a reference also to the bird of prey that has been caught and is now pretty much a part of the soil. So the bird symbolizes in that sense the second person of the Trinity, who embraces the first and the third. That God the Father is in a sense implied as the master of the dauphin, and the Holy Spirit in the fiery kind of descending bird. But it is the Son as a falcon, in which, in buckling, in sacrificing itself in the fire, that reenacts, to quote Sarah Winters, it reenacts the surrender of the Son's falcon-like transcendence for a dove-like immanence in the incarnation. So we see it, and as Professor Prakash mentioned that, we talk about Yeats. And so towards the end of the 19th century, we can see a very different kind of a Christian idea that is coming in here. And the contradiction then is there between the octave and the sestet. The first 8 lines and the next 6 lines pose a contradiction here, because where in the first 8 we are looking at the kestrel and we are looking at the way in which it remains suspended in midair, in the sestet the idea of the Cillian, which is actually a different spelling of the Cellian, which is the strip of land. So this creates it throws up, it's a puzzle, it throws a challenge. And one of the contemporary critics who has addressed this challenge is Hilda Hollis. And Hilda Hollis says that a key problem for interpretation is that Hopkins admires a powerful bird of prey in the octave, but in the second tercet he seems to valorize a humble life of suffering. So Hollis says that I contend that Hopkins particularly valued the Windohover because he engaged in a type of counterpoint of meaning, not just of rhythm throughout this poem. In the preface to his collection of poems, Hopkins focuses on his use of rhythm. Of particular note is his concern with counterpoint. I think this idea that Hilda Hollis gives us provides a very viable way of unpacking or addressing the challenge that this poem, that I think is like a puzzle, because we have a poem that is dedicated to Christ. One knows that in all of Hopkins' poetry, the Christian idea of suffering is important. So the octave and especially the second part of the sestet throws it's like a point counterpoint situation, where at one level we see great majesty in the power that the kestrel has, but in the second part what is valued more than this flight of the kestrel is the earth and its turning over, indicating that maybe the bird of prey that is caught, the wimpling wing, can't be decoded. We don't know what Hopkins really meant, but the wimpling wing throws this challenge, and one wonders that maybe apart from this rhythm that he has used, he has also introduced the idea of the counterpoint through the inscape and in-stress and the sprung rhythm. So of course Dennis Donoghue, who had called this a fundamentally defective poem, sees it as a kind of post-romantic symbol of energy and so on. But the theory that Hilda Hollis presents to us appears to be more viable. Again here, what do you think, Professor Prakash, about this idea of a kind of counterpoint being brought? And this contradiction is somewhere, I feel what you said, that it's realistic, is true to life, almost as if we are seeing a kind of two broad hierarchies in the world.
No, there is a very deep sense in what you are suggesting, and you began with prosody, and in fact that prosody has been totally turned upside down, in the sense that sonnet is supposed to be one single unit, and that the lines don't matter whether they are 8/6 or 3 quatrains and 1 couplet, because the theme is consistent. Here, very consciously, the poet is dividing the argument into two parts, the 8 lines and the 6 lines. And in the 6th line, the counterpoint is given, and that counterpoint does not answer or does not exactly contradict, but offers a different point of view. And finally, there is a riddle. So the field is now left open for the reader to interpret it in the way he or she has to interpret. So I think it's a very intellectual exercise, and the logic is very exact. It's controlled, and some people would have used the word distilled also. This is distilled poetry, absolutely pure poetry,
yes,
where no word is wasted, where there is no confusion, and you say what you want to say it in the simplest possible manner, but when you say it, then it puzzles you, and puzzle in fact is the key to Hopkins' poetry.
In fact, there is an enigma, I think, at the center of it all, which is the enigma of life, which is the enigma of connecting, I think, the Christian idea with life, about how to do it. And I think the bird of prey is there, and the predatory bird is there. So it represents the kind of power, I think,
Yes.
that can be associated with a certain social group. And but the glory lies not in that descent. The glory finally lies, the gash gold vermilion is in this earth, That's
And you
turning
all very,
over.
very beautifully brought out the idea of the furrow, the idea of the land. And the land has, limits on both sides, and it's in the middle, and it's shining. Now that exactly is the vision of religion being a part of human existence, and that religion is not the conventional religion. This is a kind of awareness that gets strengthened with time and shines. So the ordinary land, which is neither here nor there, but in the middle, and drawing maybe energy from both sides, finally starts shining like vermilion.
Right. So, if we actually again look at Hollis, who says life and death seem to converge in the Windohover in the word buckle that occurs in the first, and says that this reading of the poem, buckle, would seem to refer to the meeting of the two birds, that there is not one, that there are two birds because there is a wimpling wing and the breaking of the smaller one. It might also refer, however, to the meeting of the two counterpoint readings and their ultimate severance. So, this contrast between the hawk as a minion and the bird as a chevalier, the suffering Christ, is evident in this meeting, and this admirable strength of the hawk is compromised by the reminder that it is a part of the fallen world. So the small bird is not Christ anymore, the falcon is Lucifer, but physical suffering, physical power, in a sense meet, there is an encounter, and this encounter is both structural and thematic, because the 8 lines and the last part, there is a structural present a structural encounter, and yet if we say that there are, if at all we go with this particular theory, that there is the possibility of the smaller bird, then the two ideas or the counterpoint, really speaking, meet. So this recognition, in a sense, of the counterpoint in the Windohover is important to a reading of this poem. The concept of counterpoint, Hollis says, directs us to see contradiction rather than immanent meaning. And this is important because when we read this poem and we also move to the Wreck of the Deutschland, the Wreck of the Deutschland also presents to us, of course, it is about the nuns who died in the shipwreck, and that influenced Hopkins so much that he gave up his vow to not write, and he wrote the Wreck of the Deutschland. And there too, the idea of mastery, the nun who's shown to be a tall nun, and these are nuns who were exiled from the German kingdom because of the Fork Laws. The Fork Laws were laws that, in a sense, increased the power of the state over the church. So this also led to the exile of people who did not go along with these. So Hopkins writing about the nuns who were exiled is quite political in that sense, just as the Windohover presenting point and counterpoint, to present contradiction rather than clear meaning, is very, very interesting, I think, for somebody who's also coming from a position of religion. So a meaning is at variance, and differing interpretations struggle as the sonnet progresses. So there is a Christian reading of humility and death that takes over finally through the Cillian, but also there is glory in the meek, there is glory in the humble in this sense. So the two contrary ideas are held together within the same poem, and this is a sonnet. So two very different ideas are present here, two readings that do not negate each other, but that come together in that moment, I think, when the Windohover or the bird descends. And that is this, it brings out what is called a certain kind of tension in Hopkins' poetry as he struggles to deal with, within the Christian context, Hollis points out despair and death, to find a Christian meaning in what he sees around him. So this is a very, very important aspect of Hopkins' poetry, to use poetry, not to use prosody, to bring out the complexity of life and of the relationship between religion and life itself, the lived life, which in a certain sense I think also makes him akin to the Victorian period. And this is where I'd request Professor Prakash to see, how the connections, I think, are really speaking there. And all these ideas are there in the wreck of the Deutschland also.
I believe that Hopkins also is raising the question of language as expression, and that language doesn't matter at all. It's prosody, and it's the gap between words, and words are denied the kind of meaning that they have. So finally, there is no message. There is only suffering. There is only a kind of thinking. There is a kind of understanding that can't be verbalized, can't be articulated, and that one has to be. So that kind of message at the end of the 19th century, when things would really boil up and become different, and then move to the 20th century, where there will be confusion on one side, and there will be a kind of movement towards inside, and the person wonders whether this or the other sense can be made out of it. So I think Hopkins has this message to give, that just confront things as they are and think about them, and finally the answer will not come in any concrete crystallized form, but then definitely the time spent on it would be worth doing. So that kind of meaning.
Yes.
And please give your concluding to this
I would
sentences.
just, want to end with a quote by Robert Bridges, who brought to us Hopkins' poetry, and says this about the wreck of the Deutschland, that it is like a great dragon folded in the gate to forbid all entrance, and confident in his strength from past success. So I think this idea of inviting the reader, and yet preventing the reader from giving itself up to any simplistic meaning, is something that Hopkins achieves through the ideas of inscape and in-stress, as well as through the prosody of sprung rhythm.
Well, friends, the way the idea has been given exposition, I think this is worth thinking about more and more. I hope you have liked the discussion done by Professor Payal Nagpal, and she has given more food for thought for future discussions. Whenever we discuss poetry, we would like to get back to Hopkins for some kind of guidance. Thank you.